And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hi there, this is your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook, and I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan on this Sunday, September 7th, 2025, and looking at the sea ice way in the far north off of the Beaufort Sea coastline. There is a little bit of ice there, but the concentration is pretty low. And as far as open water, certainly down along the lower Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait. Again, we're still waiting for minimum ice extent to occur here in the next couple of weeks. And temperature-wise, readings continue to be seasonably mild across at least the mainland. We do have still some warm temperatures over the Panhandle. And as we go into tonight, stronger low, central pressure down around 976 millibars, passing just south of the central Aleutians into Monday afternoon. This system ahead of it has gale force winds from the southeast and south, and then on the backside, northeast and north winds to 50-knot storm force winds there. Now, a little cooler air will reside across northern and western portions of the state, but not drastically colder, though some snow is on the way. By the time we get into later Wednesday and Thursday, this system is going to be tracking up into the western Gulf. That's going to draw down colder air along the west side of the state and also allow for some wet accumulating snow along the north slope and spine of the Brooks Range for Wednesday evening through early Friday morning. And we're also going to see with this system by Tuesday passing just south of the Alaska Peninsula. This low then will scoot up along the south end of Kodiak Island into the western Gulf by Wednesday afternoon. And that's going to force this frontal system all along the Gulf Coast into the Panhandle with periods of stronger gusty winds and moderate to locally heavy rainfall, especially here along the northeastern Gulf Coast and parts of the Panhandle. So Monday's forecast for the southeast, winds will be southerly 10 to 15 knots, waves maybe a couple of feet there, Lynn Canal and Stevens Passage. Northwest to west winds, Dixon Entrance at 10 knots, waves 2 maybe 4 feet off of Craig. South winds near Sitka turning southeast outside of Cross Sound, and southeast to east winds 15 to 20 knots outside of Yakutat Bay to Cape Suckling, 5 to 6 foot waves. On Tuesday, winds will generally be southeasterly, Stevens Passage up through Lynn Canal, waves a foot or two. And then look for variable winds, 5 to maybe 10 knot west winds along the west side here of Prince of Wales Island for Tuesday, with waves a couple of feet around Metlakatla. But as far as out to the west, those winds are going to turn southerly off of Sitka and then southeast outside of Cross Sound and increase easterly 20 to 25 knots outside of Yakutat Bay to Cape Suckling, waves generally running around 5 feet. Monday, we'll see variable winds outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance, east side of the Kenai Peninsula, and lower Cook Inlet at just 10 knots. Waves may only be a couple of feet within Prince William Sound, and there in lower Cook Inlet, look for southeast winds, 10 to 15 knots, middle Cook Inlet up to Turnagain Arm in the north end there of the inlet toward Anchorage, with waves running 2 to 3 feet. Tuesday, winds will increase with that low pressure system that's going to be approaching the south end of Kodiak Island by time we get into pre-dawn Wednesday morning, so out ahead of it. Easterly winds are going to increase outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance, and they are in lower Cook Inlet, east-southeast gales to 35 knots on Tuesday. Waves running around 10 feet there, especially up through Kamishak Bay. Easterly winds 25 knots, Prince William Sound 6 foot waves, and then north winds 25 to 30 knots. Middle and upper Cook Inlet with waves 5 to as high as 8 feet. On Monday, Kodiak Island will see west-southwest winds at 15 to 20 knots, waves 4 to 5 feet, and then some variability because of the frontal system lifting northeastward a bit. We're going to see winds become east-southeast to 30 knots as you trail out down along the lower end of the Alaska Peninsula Monday. Waves could be 5 to as high as 9 feet there just south of Falls Pass. And then with the low taking a position east-southeast of Sand Point on Tuesday, east winds, southeast to east winds 30 knots, Shelikof Strait there east of Chiknik, 35 knot gales out of Bristol Bay, and then on the backside look for north to northwest winds 30 to 35 knots with waves as high as 14, 15 feet either side there of Cold Bay and Falls Pass. Now, along the Aleutians for Monday, there are storm warnings for the central Aleutians. Atka, Adak could see northeast to north winds coming around to the northwest at 50 knots. And then the eastern Aleutians, Unalaska through Nikolsky, ahead of the low center that's going to be passing just south of the Aleutians. East-southeast winds, 40 to 45 knot gales. And then on Tuesday in the remnant, in the passage of the low, we find winds turn northwesterly, 40 knot gales Unalaska through Nikolsky, falling off to 30 knot northwest winds there, Atka to Adak, and then finally becoming more westerly, 15 to 20 knots west of Adak. On Monday, within Bristol Bay, west winds 10 knots, or at 15 knots, north winds 10 knots out of Kuskokwim Bay. 30-knot easterly winds there at the Pribilofs, St. Paul, St. George. Going up the coast, north-northwest winds 10 to 15 knots with waves of 2 to 3 feet along the lower Yukon coast and along the area, at least the south shore here of Norton Sound. And then for Tuesday, we find winds still influential of that low on the other side of the Alaska Peninsula. 30-knot northeast winds out of Bristol Bay, 30-knot north winds out of Kuskokwim Bay, as well as 30-knot north winds there in the Pribilofs. Waves could be as high as 10 feet out toward the Pribilofs. And then out of Norton Sound and along the lower Yukon coast, look for northeast to north winds 20 to 25 knots with waves of 4 to 5 feet. And then in the far north, to start out, west side of the Seward Peninsula off of Wales, Port Clarence, north winds 10 knots. Winds, though, southwesterly at 10 knots with waves a foot or two out toward Gamble. And then coming up through the lower Chukchi Sea, kind of a mixed bag of winds. Lower Chukchi Sea to off of Wainwright and Point Lay, winds turn just light at 5 knots out of the east. Waves a couple few feet at most. And then along the Beaufort Sea coast, Utqiagvik through Prudhoe Bay, north winds 15 knots. Waves 2 to 3 feet, turning westerly 10 knots there at Kaktovik. On Tuesday, look for north-northeast winds at Kaktovik, Prudhoe Bay at 10 knots. Those easterly winds, Utqiagvik through Wainwright at 10 to 15 knots. And then as we drop down through the lower Chukchi Sea, coming around the Lisburn Peninsula, winds on Tuesday will be out of the north at 15 knots with waves 3 to 5 feet. And finally, along the west side of the Seward Peninsula, north side of St. Lawrence Island, look for north to northeast winds at 15 knots. And waves generally running 3 to 5 feet on Tuesday.